Hello, Geeks and Ghouls. As promised, we're talking about the Books of Blood by Clive Barker, and we have to talk about the second story in the first Book of Blood, The Midnight Meat Train, which also became a movie back in 2008 and was a good movie. Let me tell you why this story is phenomenal, and it's a good demonstration of what Clive Barker can do as an author very early on. Warning, I'm going to spoil the entire story. Yes, I have yet to make a video about the very first story, the Book of Blood. I don't know if I'll do it on its own, if I do it towards the end, along with the final story, Jerusalem Street, because they're like the covers of the Books of Blood, like the front, the back cover. It's a story that unfolds everything else, and I'm not quite sure I won't talk about this. And yes, I know there have been two movies about the Books of Blood, the original story, as well as in Jerusalem Street, but yeah, that's another kind of story. They're not my favorites, and I'd like to talk about the favorites first, or the interesting ones. And Midnight Meat Train, as a premise, is a very boring story. I get it, being trapped in a moving underground train along with a serial killer is a scary idea. But you know what? The whole slasher thing of being trapped alone at night in a secret place with a killer, it's been done to death, and it's kind of boring. And I guess it was kind of boring back in 1986 when this story came out, or was it earlier? It was 1994. It was starting to become a bit of a tired old cliche, I guess. You can see that Clive Barker is different though from early on, because it starts this way. Leon Kaufman was no longer new to the city. The Palace of Delights, he always called it, in the days of his innocence. But that was when he lived in Atlanta, and New York was still a kind of promised land where anything and everything was possible. Now Kaufman had lived 3.5 months in his dream city, and the Palace of Delights seemed less than delightful. And that's just the mood, like that's New York. Our protagonist Leon Kaufman, who just came there, and he started to lose the appeal. New York, I love you. Love, never. It had been a best infatuation. And now, after only 3 months living with his object of adoration, spending his days and nights in her presence, she had lost her aura of perfection. New York was just a city. And just like that, it's like New York is like this perfect woman, or man, I'm not judging, but it's very heteronormative here. So you have this perfect woman you always love to date and put to bed, and you feel like if you do that you're happy. And you spend 3.5 months and you realize that this perfect woman is not perfect. She has her moody days and she's not perfect. Day to day you spend time with them and they're not perfect anymore. He used this as a symbol for how our protagonist feels. And things are getting more complicated because there is a killer on the loose. There is the subway slaughters, because a maniac is killing people in the subway. This guy is called Mahagany, and we get some point of views from his perspective, and you start to get this feeling that something is off with this guy, because it appears like he's doing this all the time. It's not just 2 or 3 victims, but he's doing it continuously, and it's higher cost. So you start to think, something's off here. And as the story progresses, Leon is an accountant. He takes an overtime to finish his work, so he has trained to take the late train back home, and that's the same train that the killer is in. So at some point, Leon falls asleep, and this gives the opportunity for Mahagany, the slayer, to come in and grab another person from his wagon. And Leon wakes up and realizes there have been no stops, but where's the other guy? Push comes to shove, he sees the second wagon, how people are slain there, and he faints, so the killer cannot see him, because the train stops and all passengers are asked to come off and change trains, but he can't hear it because he fainted, so he's trapped in this wagon who goes somewhere else with the driver, and it seems like the killer, not the driver, so the plot thickens. So we have Leon going through the wagon, seeing the slaughter, and he screams, the killer finds him, and they fight, and he kills the killer. And the train stops in the middle of nowhere, lights go out, and this is where, up to this point, the story is anticlimactic. Okay, it's a scary idea. You're in the subway station and there's a killer on the loose. This happens to you. It's scary. I mean, you're in the subway at night alone, without slayers, and it's scary because you're under the earth and anything can happen. You cannot escape. If something happens, you cannot escape because the train is moving, and if you jump out, you do not know. It's the perfect trap. It's a trap within a trap. The story feels anticlimactic. I mean, there is this sense of mystery, this sense of intrigue, what happens next. And since it's my third time reading it, it was not that. It was kind of like, boring. It's okay, the first time around, the thrills are there, the lights go out, and then the real horror begins. Because the doors open, and there are these ghoulish people coming in, and they start to feed on the corpses. And they tell Leon that you're next. We killed the old guy, you're the new guy, because we're the fathers of the city. We are here for ages and ages. And actually there is a Cthulhu-like monstrosity among them, just to make it more of a cosmic horror story. You're next. And Leon's like, no, I'm not. But he's convinced. Let's say he's convinced. Let's not spoil the entire story. But the fathers make some good arguments. And this is the scary part of the story, to me at least, because we start with this story of a serial killer that is very boring, and within 28 pages we're into the depths of cosmic horror. And something I have to say about Clive Barker is that his stories are pregnant with ideas and concepts, and here we have a lot of them. And I could easily say that the Midnight Meat Train is having a message about how modern cities eat up of the people, how society feeds on the nameless people, the nameless few, about patriarchy, and all of that. It will be valid. However, I think that this analysis will steal a lot of what makes the story effective, because Clive Barker in the Midnight Meat Train takes this idea of the patriarchy feeding on the nameless few, on the lone ship, like, the sacrifices to the elder gods. He actually goes into the atavistic memory of gods and sacrifices in the text. So it's very easy to say that yes, Clive Barker is he's telling us all about social inequality and about patriarchy and about how the older people, the older generations, are feeding on the young, or the weak, or the poor. But no, it's not. The way this is presented here, it's very atavistic. It's not about higher meanings. It's presented to us in a way, in a cosmic horror way, that we all can understand deep in our soul. That's what makes it a scary story. He doesn't try to stand on a soapbox and talk about how his horror story about a guy killing people on the subway is about social issues. He just, he said he gets us there, and we can feel it. And despite of how we feel politically, what's our social status, what are our politics, our gender, our class, or our age, we can feel this horror of there is something bigger, there is a big conspiracy that covers up the entire parade. There is the system that protects the powerful, the elder, the patriarchy. We'll call it patriarchy because it helps the fathers, even though they're men and women. There's a system that protects the hidden few, the elite, the hidden elite, from the rest of us, and they can do whatever they want. You know what? Even if you're a millionaire, entrepreneur, you're like in the stock market. So the 1%, but not the 1 billionth, I guess, or the 1 millionth. You're not like the rest of us. You're not one of us, the masses, but you can still feel that there is a conspiracy of people who are after you. And I get even some of the billionaires, some of the mega rich people feel that way. that there is a set of conspiracy around them. It's a very atavistic feeling, a very atavistic fear, and the way the story is set, how it starts with a very real fear of being trapped somewhere with a killer, moves forward and ends up somewhere where cosmic horror exists. And this is why this story, well, not my absolute 100% favorite story of Clive Barker, is so damn effective. Because it talks about something we all understand, about two fears of us, two very deeply rooted fears, and the way we transition from one place to the other is just seamless. It's like, yes, there are hints, and okay, this is over, but where the rest of it is going, there's still some story threads coming out. And I think that the worst part of it, the most horrifying part, is the ending where Leon is just, he survived the slaughter, the slayer, Mahogany, but now he has to become him in order to progress, in order to survive. And he pays a price for that. So that's another fear. What if I slay the monster only to become the monster? And that's a very real fear too. That's a very grim perception of reality. And deep down, we know that, we can feel that. That's a perfect story. That's yet another perfect story in this great collection, the Books of Blood, because it understands natively what fear is and conveys that in a very similar way. Of course, there is this smile of a lover who is not as perfect as we thought it was. And then it goes into systemic inequality. You know what, that's very deep, and I could probably talk for hours about this, but it would be boring. But you know what I mean about. This story is about the horror of living in a modern city, in all of its tiers, from surface level dehumanization to being trapped, to being dehumanized, to being a cog in the system. It's like layers of hell. Only it's layers of hell of living in New York or any other big city. Because we don't know what other cities hide underneath. Right? Hope you like this video and subscribe because more stories from the Books of Blood are coming. And actually leave a comment below. I want to know if you want to have the stories in a chronological order or read them on a whim and just go through them and just make a playlist where they're in order at the end. I'd love to hear your opinion and stay spooky.